This episode of Palmetto Primetime is brought to you by Jennifer Blanchard, a financial planner with Commonwealth Financial Group, who specializes in working with business owners, individuals, and families to help them plan for a secure financial future. Reach out to her today. Visit www.commonwealthfg.com. I'm Sarah A. Ford, and I'm a victims' rights lawyer. I serve as legal director at the South Carolina Victim Assistance Network, where I lead a team of attorneys and advocates to provide direct legal services to South Carolina crime victims. I'm a lifelong South Carolinian. I'm also a former public defender and prosecutor, where I prosecuted violent crimes against women and children. I'm passionate about giving victims a voice in the criminal justice process.
Hi, I'm Mandy Powers Norrell. I've been a lawyer practicing in South Carolina for almost 25 years now in the areas of personal injury and bankruptcy. Now I also prosecute part-time for the local solicitor's office, and I was a member of the South Carolina House of Representatives for 4 terms until I was involuntarily retired in 2020.
Welcome to Palmetto Primetime, where we talk about law, crime, and social justice issues.
This podcast was created by Sarah A. Ford and Mandy Powers Norrell and is produced by Zeke Stevenson.
Our next guest is no stranger to anyone who watched the Murdaugh trial. He is our South Carolina elected Attorney General, Alan Wilson. While he is a public figure and a politician, he was here to give us a glimpse into what was going on behind the scenes as we watched the Murdaugh trial and to hear what the prosecution was thinking, a little bit of what they were doing. And I hope y'all enjoy the conversation.
Hey, welcome back to Palmetto Primetime. And we are so excited today because we have an absolute rock star of South Carolina and the South Carolina trial scene. He was the leader of the Justice League, as they came to be known during the Murdaugh trial. We have with us today my dear friend, and I think you're going to just adore him as much as I do, Attorney General Alan Wilson. Thank you so much for being here.
Welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Mandy. I need to put you over my press shot. That's so sweet.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. I know that you are so busy doing all the things, but we've had so many questions about you and your amazing group of lawyers that prosecuted the Murdaugh trial. I mean, just amazing work that you all have done. How do you feel? I mean, it's been a couple of weeks. Is it a little bit of a deep breath, or how are y'all feeling?
Slowly getting back into a routine. I mean, I think it took everyone a week to kind of come off the high and then reacclimate into a routine, because our routines have been thrown off so much. I mean, people forget this trial was originally scheduled for 3 weeks and it went double that amount of time. So it's been great coming home and reintroducing myself to my children. Mandy, you'll love this. While I was gone, my wife and daughter adopted a 3-legged cat. We can talk about that later in the segment, because I know you said the universe gave you a dog. The universe gave me a 3-legged cat, and we'll talk about that. But it's been a nice kind of reacclimation to the world.
Oh, I love that so much. I once had a 3-legged cat. It was one of my favorite pets ever. That's so great. So I kind of want to jump right into sort of that, and then maybe get into some specifics from the trial. Alan, you have been in so many statewide campaigns, and I know from doing campaigns, you get sort of, or my body at least, gets sort of dependent on the brain chemistry of the I think it's cortisol that you use when you're in like a really intense kind of situation, like a trial or a campaign. And then, at least for me, when it's over, I have a hard time with reentry and a hard time being still. Did you experience that after the trial?
I mean, obviously, you're going 1,000 miles an hour for 6 weeks straight, and behind the scenes, we were all living in a hotel right there on I-95 in Walterboro, South Carolina. The entire AG staff was on one hallway at the Hampton Inn and Suites. It was kind of like dorm life in college. We were doing our laundry down in the downstairs, and we were eating in the little snack room area. We'd get up early in the morning. Those of us that got up early enough would work out in a little gym, and then we'd go get dressed and we'd carpool over to the courthouse. We'd do a full 8-9 hour day. We'd come back, everyone would eat, then come back to the war room. We had a room where we all just kind of gathered and we went over what were going to be the next witnesses. What what do we need to do the next day? And then we would all go back to our corners, do our prep work, and probably about 9 or 10 o'clock at night, everyone would kind of recede and go back to sleep. And it was very much like a college dorm lifestyle, without all the partying. But it was a great experience. But, when I got through with that, going 100 or 1,000 miles an hour, and then all of a sudden you get done, you go home, and now you're going 10 miles an hour, and it feels like you're going so slow. That was a little bit of an adjustment.
That's what I always say, like campaigns, because that's like, I have never been in a 6-week trial. I've been maybe a week and a half trial, but campaigns are like a train that goes faster and faster and faster, and then it just stops and everybody's kind of thrown off, and now you're walking. And that's what I would imagine the a 6-week trial with that much intensity would be like.
Right. And a 6-week trial where the entire world is watching everything you do. I mean, if people would send screenshots of us on, like, if you make a funny face and it's literally a second long and someone screenshots it and then it becomes a meme and they say, Wilson, if you're scratching your nose and then someone screenshots, sounds like you're picking your nose or something, so I got a lot of those. So it was a little harrowing in that way.
Yeah. I did some of those screenshots, not of that, but like when people would be like,
You know how to make memes?
I don't know how to make memes, but I would screenshot when people looked exhausted or disgusted, and I would be like, yeah, this is me. I can relate.
It's so hard to be on though all the time. I mean, you're in front of a jury, we're used to that, but being in front of a camera for weeks on end from 8:30 in the morning, you're walking in till 6, 7 o'clock at night. I mean, that's intense. That really is.
It was at first, but I'll be honest with you, you kind of forget the cameras are there. Honestly, you're just in a courtroom, and there might have been 200 people in the courtroom, but you didn't really feel like you were on national TV. It really just felt like you were in a rural courtroom. So you forgot the cameras were there, kind of like a reality show.
We had like social media. We were analyzing this. Sarah and I think, watched every minute of the trial at least once. And we were sort of in this community online where people were talking about it, people from all over the world. And one thing that everybody sort of speculated on was, do you think they go back at the end of the day and look to see, what the zeitgeist is and what people thought about the day? Did y'all have anybody doing that, or did y'all do that?
I mean, some of our folks on our team were, they were following social media. I mean, I really didn't follow a lot of the news coverage at the time. Honestly, we were really too busy to be marinating in the news coverage. And I rarely go look at my social media ever. But we people would we had a text thread, everyone on the staff in the courtroom, because we'd be texting during the trial, like, hey, you need to ask this question, or hey, we need to get this witness ready, that we're going to be finished, just kind of logistics. But every once in a while, someone would say, hey, this is Pat, this is going around on social media, and be a screenshot of me making a funny face, or Craighton doing something funny, or whatever. And so that went around, but that's about the sum total of how I knew what was going on social media. Of course, every once in a while, I would get a text from my good friend, Mandy Powers Norrell. I didn't really know what was going on.
Let's talk about Judge Newman, because he kind of the internet adopted him as like the world's, best judge, fatherly figure. We've all been like, we need somebody to tell us it's time to take a stretch break. Let's stand up. Mm-hmm. I mean, isn't he amazing?
He was amazing. He did such a great job managing the trial. He was in complete control of the courtroom, which as a prosecutor, I like judges that are fair but firm, and don't let people run over him. Don't let people abuse the situation. He seemed to know when people needed to take a stretch break. I also love the fact that his wife was always sitting there off to the side. And I thought that was really good for her to be there. And I enjoyed talking with her toward the end of the trial. But yeah, he's the gold standard of judges, in my opinion. And he did a fantastic job. And I think everyone really appreciated it. Listen, he didn't always rule for us, but even when he ruled against us, I'm like, okay, that's fair. I can see why he did that. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, there was no ruling he did for or against us where I was like, that's out of bounds. He was really down the middle.
100%. And, since I've started kind of watching some other trials as part of my attempt to withdrawals, and I cannot believe how much South Carolina courts are head and shoulders above. I watched pieces of one in Wisconsin, watching one in Utah now. And these judges, they should have watched Judge Newman, because they don't seem to have control of the courtrooms.
Well, I haven't seen these judges in action, but, like I said, Judge Newman, I think everyone in the courtroom was captivated by how he controlled the situation. And again, we all know what he had gone through several weeks prior, his family. And, that was always cognizant of that. And I just thought that he just did such a great job. And what a gentleman and what a professional he was. And so we were lucky to have him as a judge in this trial, because the eyes of the world were on it, and we needed an adult in the room to manage the whole process, and he did a fantastic job.
Yeah,
he did. So kind of looking at the trial as a whole, supposed to be 3 weeks, ended up being 6 weeks. How do how did y'all come up with that? I know you think, okay, we have so many witnesses, but y'all it was like 200 plus witnesses potentially. We think it's going to be 3 weeks, and then it just keeps getting longer and longer and longer. How do you adjust, mid trial like that to change it up?
Well, we had all these contingency plans. If this happens, then this will happen. If this doesn't happen, then that'll happen. And so, and listen, when I signed the case to Craighton Waters, Craighton's very tenacious and he's very detail oriented, and the battle rhythm, as I like to call it, it would change from week to week, from day to day, depending on what was going on. But Craighton did such a great job, and everyone had a lane, everyone had a job. Give a shout out to Carly Jewell, who was sitting on the bench right behind us. She was the chief paralegal. She did just an amazing job, kind of like the command sergeant major of the group. And everyone had a job, everyone had a role, and they executed it perfectly. And so it was a team effort.
We interviewed Dr. Kenny Kinsey, and he was telling us about that he loved how everybody was very specific in their role, and just everybody fit together like pieces of a puzzle.
Yep, that's exactly what it was.
So were there any turning points in the trial that you thought, well, this was starting to go poorly, and then it turned around?
So I'm going to come back to that question. Let me go out and bring it in. Okay. The day before, or the Friday before the trial, I told the team, I went down there and basically sat the whole prosecution team down. And this was kind of my St. Crispin's Day speech. I'm joking, but what I would told them is, think of this as a football game. Don't ever look at one play, whether we do something really good or we do, like you turn the ball over, you fumble it, or you throw an interception. You got to get up and play the next down. You got to go up and do the next series. Don't let one bad play or one good play define your perception. There are going to be days where you feel like there's no way we can win. There are going to be days that you feel like there's no way you can lose. Don't believe either of those days. You got to kind of stay in the middle, stay in the zone. The other side is not going to let us walk into their end zone, right? We're not going to we're not going to run up the score. This is going to be a real competition. We have a story to tell. We believe we can prove all the elements beyond a reasonable doubt, but you just kind of treat it like a game in that regard. And so, like I said, I believed that we had a good plan. We could execute the plan, but don't get bogged down into any one moment. And to your question, Mandy, was there a moment? There were lots of moments where I personally felt like, oh, that was awesome. And there were moments where I felt, we took it on the chin. But then I would always remind myself, hey, we turned the ball over or we picked the ball up. Let's not get hung up on that. Let's play the next series, because you got full 4 quarters to play, to, pardon the analogy there, but that's kind of how I viewed it. I can't speak for the others, but that's how I personally processed it. Now, I think obviously Alec Murdock taking the stand was incredible. I think the whole world was really captivated by that. And Craighton's strategy was, and I know you got a lot of flack for this, but I knew what he was going to do, is let the guy talk. Let him run his mouth, because he feels
it was
like
great.
Yeah, and a lot of people wanted him to be shut down, but no, we wanted him to talk, and I thought Craighton did a fantastic job with that.
He did.
So that was a pivotal moment. I remember watching the jurors' faces. Everyone saw the Bubba dog video, or the Cash the dog's tail video, the kennel video. The first time that video was played, where you hear Alex's voice in the background, before anyone knew about it. I was watching the jurors' faces when that video got played, and several of the jurors, there was like like visual facial expressions, and I remember that one moment when seeing a juror react to, he was there, after he said no, And that was a moment where it's like, wow, I think we got him there.
That's amazing. That's the thing that I missed watching it on television. I didn't see how the jurors were connecting. I knew how I was connecting, but that's fascinating.
Yeah, and there were days where, and I know there were days that were very long and tedious and boring. There were times people would be watching, and I know this because people explained this to me afterwards, but we would have to do an in-camera hearing. We had to send the jury out because we had to talk about evidence that may or may not be admissible, but the judge would have to hear it, like the financial crimes. And you both attorneys know this. You know, you can't say something prejudicial. The judge has to hear it to see if it's relevant and if it passes 404B and all of those rules of evidence. And so we'd have to go through and put witnesses up there. And then the judge would say, okay, I'm going to allow it in. And then he'd bring the jury back in. And then we would do the same thing again. And people would probably like, this is monotonous, this is tedious. We have to present the information the way that we have to present it for to get into evidence. And so I think that was a lot of people struggled with that.
It was one thing on social media because we had the advantage of, talking with each other, talking with other people, and, being able to say, I'm in this position, this is what I think I would probably do and why. And it was something that I think Mandy and I bonded over, trying to explain some of the things that y'all were choosing to do, the in-camera stuff, the financial things, and why that was happening. Did it concern, obviously not in the moment, but perhaps is it concerning the attention that this case has received? I mean, we've heard from people from Australia, Germany, all over the world that track this. Was that surprising to you all?
It's surprising that people followed this trial. Like you both just said, you watched almost every minute of it. And that, I'll tell you what really house one morning, and the security people have been lined up since about 4 a.m. And they were coming from Texas, from New Jersey, from Ohio, from Florida, from California. But they were like, the line, it was like going to a Walt Disney ride. The line was around the courthouse, at 6 a.m. And it was just that was really weird to me that people were that captivated by this trial. And it was a fascinating trial, don't get me wrong. And I understand why it captured the attention of the nation, but people were obsessed with it. And it was just amazing.
That's so true. I was getting texts from Hawaii in the middle of the night, just like, what do you think about this? Do you have any information about that? And it's just, but this is an unusual trial. This is not like so many others. And, it has the notion that can someone be above the law?
I was gonna pivot to Dr. Kenny Kinsey, who I absolutely adore. When I was a solicitor in Orangeburg, he testified for me many times. I know that he did such an amazing job the first time, but then when you called him to the stand again in rebuttal, we were all like, Dr. Kenny Kinsey is back, but our AG is gonna do
what a duo.
We were so excited. Was that planned? Did y'all have this? Was this just like one of your night before, like, I'm going to take this, I'm going to do, Dr. Kenny Kinsey's, direct, we're going to handle this. How did that come about?
I didn't know until that was on a Tuesday, if I recall. And I think it was Sunday afternoon where I actually realized that I might be taking a witness. And I went to Craighton and I said, Craighton, I've been here a couple of weeks. I said, if I've been helping y'all, I've been working in the war room, helping y'all come up with witnesses or prep the witnesses, get the questions, go through the evidence. I mean, do the legal research on objections and things like that. I said, I'm happy to take a witness. I think Craighton was wrecked after the day and a half cross of Alec, and the staff is just working around the clock. And we were getting to the end of the state's rebuttal case. And I said, listen, I went to him and I said, hey, look, if you want help, I'll help you. And if you want me to take this witness, I'll take a witness. And so I decided to take Kenny Kinsey. I called Kenny up. I said, Kenny, I think I'm going to be directing you. And he was all excited. And so basically I started preparing that Sunday night. The interesting thing is my daughter, who is 13 years old, she's a 7th grader in Lexington. She had been begging us to go down for one day at the trial. So we were able to get someone who was coming down that Tuesday morning to bring her. I thought I was going to be doing Kenny on Monday. We had already agreed to have her there on Tuesday. Well, we didn't get to my witness on Monday. So my daughter was in the courtroom when I did that witness.
Oh, that's awesome.
But AG was sitting in the audience when I got to do that witness, and so it was kind of fun to be able to show my daughter, kind of bring your daughter to work day, and then let her dad see, or have her see me do real lawyer work, and that was really a point of pride for me.
Oh my gosh, that's like my greatest goal in life is to impress my children. Like no matter what I do, if I can impress my children, then that's how I define success. Like I'm so happy you had that moment because she must have been so proud.
And I'll tell you, I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna be honest with both of you, and however many people are watching this. As Attorney General, I haven't had the opportunity to go into the courtroom at that level in so many years, and it renewed my sense of passion for this job. It reminded me of why I love being a prosecutor, being in there and being able to engage someone and do that verbal combat that lawyers do. I fell in love all over again with the practice of law and with being a prosecutor. And Kenny and I had so much fun with it. I remember downstairs, it was during the lunch break before we were going to call him up. We were talking about reenacting the defense's theory. If y'all remember, he was the rebuttal case they put up a theory, or if you recall, they said based on the trajectories and the angle of impact of the bullets, they had these little gray men holding with the laser pointer, and it was saying they had to be between 5'2" and 5'4", and the shooter had to shoot Paul from the back of the head from inside the feed room, and therefore the blast would have impaired his vision, which means there had to be a second shooter. So there were two shooters, and they were probably 5'2" to 5'4". And Kenny and I were just like, that is absolutely ridiculous. So we reenacted it in the doorway in the office downstairs. And I said, Kenny, let's do it like for the world. There's a doorway there. Let's see if the judge will let us open that door. And he's like, I'm in. And then he said, hey, point the gun at me. I said, what? He said, yeah, point the gun at me. I said, are you sure? Anyway, I got into the courtroom, and a lot of people on social media, I'm told, were angry at me because they thought I pointed the gun at his head. But when we got in there, if you remember, I put on the record, now you've asked me to point this gun at you, correct? And he's like, yeah. When I pointed the shotgun at him, I actually wasn't pointing it at him. I was pointing it at the wall because something triggered me. I cannot point a gun, even one that I know can't be fired, at a person. And then when I put it down by his head to show the angle, I had it to the right of his head, not on his head. So a lot of people were upset by that, but I was always aware of muzzle. I always had muzzle awareness, but that was so much fun for us to do that.
That and it showed how impossible it was when you guys were just like dancing in the doorway and you're trying to like work around each other to show the defense's theory. It showed how impossible it was. I thought it was so effective.
What was cool for me, Mandy, was I went to the Moselle visit with the jury. I wasn't with the jury, but I drove separately, and we were there. Dick Harpootlian was there. So we were the people representing the state and the defense, and we were watching the jurors from a distance. The number of jurors that walked over to the feed room door and squatted down and were looking up at the door and walking in and out and just studying the door and the concrete around it. I kept thinking to myself, they're zoomed in on that, and that kind of made me feel kind of proud.
We're going to take a quick break, but we will be back shortly with South Carolina's Attorney General, Alan Wilson. I can sure help y'all understand things about the law, but financial planning, I have no idea. Jennifer Blanchard, a financial planner, specializes in holistic financial planning for business owners, individuals, and families, and handles insurance planning and investment management. Jennifer is smart, driven, and can help you understand the most complex of things in the financial world, from retirement planning and college savings to risk management and estate planning. Reach out to Jennifer today for a consultation to get your financial life in order. Give her a call at 803-308-2300 or visit her website at www.commonwealthfg.com. All right, well, we're back, y'all. Thank you so much for spending some time with us this afternoon, Attorney General Wilson. It's been great looking back at the Murdaugh trial and seeing it through your eyes and your perspective, and the amazing staff that really prosecuted the hell out of this case.
Thank you. And Sarah, please call me Alan. I appreciate the official, but it seems so informal. Just call me Alan. Mandy does.
Thank you. Thank you for for like absolving me, because every once in a while I'll be like, oh crap, I should be calling him.
Mandy and I, to the world, this may people might be shocked, but Mandy and I are actually very dear friends. I've known each other for 7 or 8 years intimately well. I mean, we've gone through a lot of stuff together and become such good friends, and I love her dearly. And so she is always, my wife's a big fan of Mandy, but
Yeah.
I appreciate you calling me Alan.
Well, we love seeing Savannah in the courtroom. We thought that she did a fantastic job. We were super proud of everybody, but it's always nice to see a capable woman prosecuting a huge case like that.
Oh, I'm so proud of Savannah. She did an amazing job. I mean, the whole team, but yeah, she did. She was the belle of the ball of the lawyers anyway, and she did a great job. But be that as it may, we had a great team. We all looked alike in that way, but I'm glad Savannah and some of the other ladies were on the team, and I thought they did a phenomenal job and acquitted themselves amazingly.
During this trial, you said you weren't watching television. I'm glad you weren't, because a lot of the pundits were just getting it so wrong. And you were aware that they criticized Craighton for the way he did the cross of Alec, and Sarah and I were online going, no, it was brilliant. He got Alec to like close the door on any alternative explanations of what happened that night, and it was like masterful to me. But it seemed very surprising that learned people were on television as legal analysts getting it so wrong. Did that seep into anybody's psyche during that, or did y'all all just swear off the television pundits?
I mean, I said I didn't really pay attention. I mean, when you're cutting on the TV and every news cycle has something about the Murdaugh case, you would see glimpses of it. I saw some national pundits. I saw some defense attorney. She was talking about it. I forget what of the national networks it was, but she was talking, she was giving her theory about how the prosecution had gotten it so wrong and the defense was beating us down. And we're like, I see it very differently. So
it's like they were watching a completely different trial than the one I was watching.
Well, they're watching it through the lens of someone who practices criminal defense law. And again, I love criminal defense attorneys because they're part of the system. I mean, I tell people prosecutors are in the construction business and defense attorneys are in the demolition business. We build stuff, they tear stuff down, but it takes both for an effective criminal justice system. So, I mean, I will defend criminal defense attorneys, but they can, I tell people all the time, the difference between a prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney is they're trying to prove a particular point of view. We are trying to prove the truth. And what I mean by that is prosecutors dismiss, we're not trying to get convictions for to get notches on our belt or a scoreboard, because we dismiss so many cases that should never even make it to court or plead them down because the facts aren't there. So we actually get rid of the bad cases and try not to prosecute. And I'm not saying there aren't prosecutors out there who abuse the system. There certainly are. But when we bring a case, we believe we're bringing it because it's 100% the truth. We can prove every element beyond a reasonable doubt. And the defense has a job to represent the interest of their client. And that's not a bad thing. That's just the reality. Whether it's true or not is not the point. They have to represent their client. We're trying to represent the truth. And that's just kind of how I see it. Maybe I'm biased, but that's just my point of view.
It's the roles. It's just have a completely different role. And so, I mean, the prosecutor's client is justice, and however they figure justice to be. And by the time you get to trial, justice is a conviction in your mind and in your goal. But before you get to trial, you're right. I dismissed 2 cases today because the facts weren't there. And that was justice.
Because you're pursuing justice and truth, not a particular outcome.
Right. I want to ask you about this because, starting out, people were saying that the defense, the biggest thing that they had on their side was this notion of what a brutal murder this was and who could do this. What would, make a person get to that point in their heads, and they didn't really think it would be done by somebody who loved his wife and son, which I think Alec very clearly did love his wife and son. And so that sort of almost became, well, this in some people's minds, well, he couldn't have done it because he loved his wife and son. And to me, my thought was, well, who else would have done it? And the only other conclusion, if it wasn't him, it was nobody, but we know it happened. So circle back around to, you know, do we have to even have an answer to that? How did y'all struggle with that?
I'll speak for myself. I didn't struggle with believing it. I struggled with whether we can convince people to make that leap. And y'all didn't get to see the unedited crime scene photos, and they're horrific. I would never wish anyone to see a loved one like that. With that being said, Alex, how he responded on, his attempts at crying in the interviews, and how jovial he was in those seconds before in the kennel video where you hear him laughing in the back, trying to get the guinea fowl out of the burnt dog's mouth. Would people believe that 3 or 4 minutes later he'd be brutally murdering people? That's a huge leap to ask someone to make.
Right.
And I believe that we could put him there. I knew we could put him there 2 minutes before the murders. Even though he was lying, we knew we had him in that regard. But would people just suffer from cognitive dissonance? Like, I could never do that. And that was always in the back of my mind. Now, with that being said, quick fun fact. So do y'all remember when Craighton was interviewing or doing the cross of Alec? He asked Alec Murdock, "Mr. Murdock, are you a family annihilator?"
Yes.
Do you remember that?
I remember.
Absolutely remember that.
During the trial, a good friend of mine
sent
me a text. I'm going to tell you, a good friend of mine sent me a text about 2 weeks earlier to my cell phone saying, "Read this." And it was a thing about family annihilator. So I went down to Don Zelenka, who was a gentleman with the beard, and I showed it to Don, and I called Craighton over there and said, "Y'all read this." And of course, family annihilator, a white man, 40s, 50s, kills their spouse and at least one child, and subsequently tries to commit suicide, either due to depression or drug or alcohol abuse, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it was like describing this situation. Right. And there was given a financial issues, all that stuff. Every element of this story was in the definition of family annihilator. And Craighton read it, Don read it. Don actually knew the guy that not invented it, but developed this theory in the 80s, and called the guy. And we put that guy on retainer for a few days to watch the trial, and kind of, we couldn't use this as evidence in the trial, but that basically fit to a T. And so that's why that question was asked of Alec Murdock. Well, the person who sent me that text message teeing that up was on this podcast right now. You want to raise your hand?
Thank you.
There
You're so kind.
So we got Mandy. We got Mandy. You supported the prosecution team. Thank you. But the point of the family annihilator is this: real people in the world do unconscionable, unthinkable acts of evil and violence to people that they love or perceive to love. Yes. You saw the Timothy Jones case in Lexington, the guy that murdered his 5 children with his bare hands. Mm-hmm. You saw Susan Smith back in the 90s roll her car into a lake, and drown her kids. And then I can give you a lot of other examples of people who murdered their children. And you could say, well, that was mental illness or whatever. Well, Alex testifying he's taking 60 opioid pills a day for 10 years plus. I mean, that had to have some psychosomatic effect on his brain physiology. But with that being said, the world is filled with stories of people who do that, and they're sociopathic about it. They can turn it on and off, and it could have been a psychotic snap for just a moment. And it's like Cliff Newman said, maybe it wasn't you, but this monster you've become. And I do believe that Alec Murdock, in his own way, loved Paul and Maggie.
I do too.
But I believe that he loved himself more.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And murdering them was the price he was willing to pay to preserve his way of life. And that simply is what happened.
I agree. And I think he told himself that he was saving them from humiliation because they didn't yet know about his financial crimes. I think he told himself that he was doing something altruistic.
Yeah, by killing, he saved them from harm, but also he threw everyone off of this discovery, which allowed Buster to go back to law school and carry the family name, which is what he wanted to preserve, his personal name, but also the family name at large. and he did an unthinkable, unconscionable act of evil to people that he probably did love, but was able to justify it and rationalize it.
Well, it's something that those of us that are, that have prosecuted cases and such, we unfortunately see when people do terrible things on a daily basis. And so I think that for people, it's so hard. I was last night, 2 children were murdered by their father in Sumter County here in South Carolina. And it's something that I hate that this case obviously got national attention, and it should have, but it's also good for those of us that do work in domestic violence to show that this is not a one-off. This is not a rarity. This is not something that is rare. And so I'm so grateful that Mandy sent you that text, and that we were able to, put that out there, because it really did. It fit it to a T.
I do want to, and thank you, Sarah. And Mandy posed a question. I'll answer that, but I want to go back to the timeline for a moment, because I think people were fascinated by that.
Yes.
You asked me if I knew Alec.
Yeah.
I had met him many years ago. I knew his father, Randolph Murdock, who was a solicitor. And I had actually been to, I believe, Alameda back about 14 years ago when I was contemplating running for attorney general, and I was traveling the state. And, Randolph Murdock was an institution, in our state criminal justice system. The Murdaugh family had been there for 86 years in that position. So, yeah, I knew the Murdaugh family. I'd met Randolph Murdock many times. I had met the Murdock brothers, John Marvin, Randy, and Alec, a number of times, but it was fleeting. We had no real relationship. So I didn't really know them, but I had met them. Going back to the timeline, we're talking about Craighton's cross-examination of Alec. And one of the things I was telling Craighton, and he did a great job of this. I said, Craighton, we have a timeline that has Alec there at 8:45 and 45 seconds, because that's the end of the 50-second video with his voice in the background. That's when it ended, at 8:45 and 45 seconds. I said, we also know that Paul and Maggie were shot between 8:49:01 and 8:49:35 seconds. So in that 34 second is when the shots began. And I can give you my reasons why, but we'll stipulate that that's when we knew it happened. Well, I said, Craighton, when you're talking to him, this is when we were taking a break. I said, let's give him the benefit of the doubt and see if you can see how that window is 8:45:45 to 8:49 and 8:49:01. So let's see how close we can get that window. So Craighton said, do you remember he was asking the questions about, okay, that video ends. How long did it take you to get the bird out of the dog's mouth? And he says, I just pinched his jowls, and he drops okay, how long did that take? He goes, 15 seconds. Okay, I'm thinking to myself, all right, we're at 8:46. And then it says, how long does it take you to, you walk the bird over? What'd you do with the bird? Well, I went and put it back in the feed room. Well, how long did that take you? Well, that was a minute. Okay, that's 8:47. So yeah. 8:47. You remember the defense put up this thing about we couldn't hear anything because he would have been asleep or whatever. Well, 8:47 is 2 minutes
like that.
2 minutes and 1 second. Well, he'd already basically blown that theory up, because he was down there, but he was there 2 minutes before the gunshots.
Okay? I love that math that that was happening as Craighton questioned him. I love that. Was the
boxing in. So you were there 8:47 roughly. And then you get into, basically, he can't remember his last words to his wife and son. I probably said bye. And then we actually drove. The golf cart probably has a maximum speed of 15, 16 miles an hour, maybe 17. But driving, when he drove from there to get a gun after discovering they were murdered, it took him 50 seconds to get back to the house. So that was driving his car going fast, 40 miles an hour. In a golf cart, it would have taken 2.5 minutes. So he was outside in the property, earshot. He would have missed it. But when he was asked, it's what he didn't say. Imagine you leave your family, both of you leave your family, and your spouse and one of your child is brutally murdered 2 minutes after you leave to go run to this market. At one point, you would tell somebody, if only I had stayed, if only I had been there. 2 minutes. Survivor's guilt. He was talking about, I was there doing what I didn't want to do, getting sweaty and, basically blaming Maggie for making him go down there.
And he was still mad about Maggie making him get sweaty. Like he was still
doing what I did. I was annoyed that I was down there. Not once. He said, if only I had stayed. I mean, that would be, as a father, and as y'all, it's like you don't want to. You don't ever put yourself in the position of missing the opportunity to save your child's life by 2 minutes and your spouse. And that resonated with me.
Me too. I would have beaten myself up for the rest of my life about that if I thought I could have stopped.
But yeah, he missed it by 2 minutes, and I thought that was very interesting with that timeline. And I think that's ultimately what hung him.
I think that's what made Craighton Waters, cross-examination so effective, is that he just allowed him. When someone's doing the work for you, you let him keep doing the work, and he let it go. And I thought that was it was fantastic, because he just kept boxed it in. It was great. It was great.
And I loved it when Craighton would say, Alec would just say what he wanted to say, and Craighton would say, okay, let's talk about that. It wasn't, no, you're going to talk about what I want you to talk about. It was, okay, let's talk about that. And then he'd lead him down another path and make him fall in a hole.
I thought it was funny. The thing that I loved was, so Alec leaves his phone at the house, obviously, when he goes down there, because he needs to be sleeping, right? He gets back to the house. His phone does like 280 steps from 902 to 906, which is with his car crank. And so 286 steps over 4 minutes. That's a lot of steps in 4 minutes for someone. And so when he was asked, what were you doing during that time? Well, I was getting ready to go see my mom. And I'm thinking, and of course, Craighton's like, okay, what did you do to get ready? Well, grab the keys, and you didn't have to take a shower. You didn't have to get dressed. You were laying on the couch, right? So, you're a busy little bee for that 4 minutes, running around trying to get ready to go see your mom, which he really didn't need to get ready because he was already ready. And by the way, the whole purpose of Maggie being over there that night was to support Alec going through his father passing and his mom's health declining. Paul and Maggie did not live there full time. They were both asked to be there, which was in the testimony by Alec. And then he leaves them there to go see his mom when he's the one that asked him to be there to begin with. And so that was just another thing that I think people really seized on.
What do you think, Alec Murdock, Corey Fleming, all of these people who are lawyers, what do you think it's done to our profession? And how can we, I guess, dig out of that? Because
I think we have dug out of it. I think people are seeing, and I don't want to comment on pending cases and other attorneys and whatnot, but I think people are seeing lawyers who abused their oath that they took and violated the law being held accountable. And look, let's not pick on lawyers, doctors, car salesmen, bakers, candlestick makers, butchers. I mean, every profession has bad people in it.
Sure.
I mean, you have good elected officials, bad elected officials. I think that, I don't want to say that our profession suffered a black eye. I think it's kind of like, was that Apollo movie where, Tom Hanks was in Apollo?
This will be our final Apollo 13.
It was our greatest failure because we got him home and safe, even though the mission was a failure. Yes, these lawyers failed on a national scale, and everyone's talking about the corruption. But it was ultimately a success because karma happened. And the system worked, and the system rooted them out. And I choose it as it's a win, not a loss for our profession, in my opinion.
I agree. I felt so light that next day. I hadn't realized how heavy. I can't imagine being a part of the trial, because watching the trial and having been friends with Alec, it weighed so heavily, and it's like the frog in the boiling water. It just got hotter and hotter, and I didn't know until it was done. And I felt like such a weight had been lifted from just the cloud over trial lawyers, over South Carolina lawyers, over just this notion that it matters who you are, and if you are of a certain pedigree, you can get away with anything. It meant so much, that verdict.
Well, this has been wonderful with you sharing, your perspective from the Murdaugh trial. I think we probably have another hour's worth of questions, so we'll have to get you to come back another time.
I want to know about your cat. Are you going to ask?
Tell us about Danger the cat.
Oh, okay. So Mandy's met my German Shepherd, Lucy.
Yes.
She's 4 years old. Well, while I was my 13-year-old who made that one trip to court that one day, she wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up, and she loves animals. She's horseback riding, anything to do with animals. And so she shadowed on the school sanctioned shadow day for a career day. She went to a veterinarian office, and she was shadowing one of our veterinarians who's a friend of ours. And while she was there, they brought a 12-week-old kitten in who had either been hit by a car or had been mangled by some animal, and it was going to lose his leg. And so they had to amputate the cat's leg to save his life. So Anna Grace was there the day that they did the surgery and nursed him back to health. The vets were calling the cat Danger. And so while I was away, she went to my wife, and who was allergic to cats, and was somehow able to talk. My wife had just gotten through breast cancer, and Jennifer said, "I'm looking at this broken cat, and I'm feeling like a person who was broken, going through all the surgeries and everything. My wife's fine now, but she said, I felt called to adopt this cat." And so she teamed up with my daughter while I was distracted with this murder trial. And so ultimately, I basically gave in. They won the debate. And so now we have a 3-legged cat and a German Shepherd at our house. And I will have to send you some pictures, Mandy. But that's how Danger, the 3-legged cat, came to be a Wilson.
Oh my
Sounds
gosh,
like
I
the
love
perfect
that.
duo for y'all to have. That's amazing.
And since I wasn't going to talk about your family and about Jennifer and everything, but I know that she has rung the bell after
She
cancer,
did.
and that
I
was
drove home from the trial for that. That happened while I was in Colleton, in Walterboro.
Oh my God, that is so awesome. And I know y'all take every opportunity to remind women to get a mammogram because
Yes.
it's so important in her diagnosis, right?
He's really big on reminding people, and men, get your checkups as well. I'm at that age now. Colonoscopy's in my near future. But get
You are
checked up.
4 days younger than me, so yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here on Palmetto Primetime. We appreciate our Attorney General Alan Wilson for joining us.
Ladies, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for sharing this with me, and I look forward to being back with you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to Jennifer Blanchard for sponsoring this episode of Palmetto Primetime. You can reach Jennifer at 803-308-2300 by email at jennifer.blanchard@commonwealthfg.com or on her website, www.commonwealthfg.com. Jennifer is a registered representative and investment advisor representative of Securian Financial Services, Inc., securities and investment advisory services offered through Securian Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Commonwealth Financial Group is independently owned and operated.
Thank you for joining us on Palmetto Primetime. We will have new episodes weekly.
Please be sure to like and subscribe anywhere that you listen to your podcasts. And also look out for us on YouTube, where we occasionally go live to discuss trials and current events. Thanks again for listening to Palmetto Primetime, y'all.